Hi, sorry this video is so late. The reason for that is because I've recorded this so many times, but trying to get into words of everything that has happened has been kind of difficult. So bear with me while I try and recap everything that's happened this past year. Starting with last year. So my daughter has been diagnosed with, and I'll put it here, Panayiotopoulos syndrome. And it is a type of epilepsy. Before we get into that, before we get into the type of epilepsy she has, or what the doctors think she has, hold on, I'll just push it back a bit. I will kind of explain some of her seizures that have happened and where we are now. So back last year she had a seizure, and at the time it was confusing because we didn't know that it was a seizure. So what happened was she woke up crying, like crying. So I ran to her room to check what was wrong, thinking it was just a night terror, because at this point she'd been having night terrors regularly for months and months. And when I got to her room, she had thrown up all over her bed. So I called for my husband, and I said, go get the shower ready and I'll bring her to you. So the shower started, and I was like, well, I'll go to Daddy. And so she was walking down the hallway while I was cleaning up the mess, and that's when later I was told that she was kind of walking in a circle, kind of like she started to walk towards her right, again towards the wall, which is kind of strange. So he went up to her and kind of coaxed her to come closer to him to get her into the shower. He called for my help because she was being a little strange at this point. So I kind of put all of her linen in a ball so none of the throat would get on the ground, and I ran to the shower. I hopped in the shower, grabbed her hands, was trying to get her to come into the shower. She wasn't really just trying to move her legs, but she kind of couldn't, which I found strange. So I kind of pulled her towards me, and her legs were kind of dragging a little bit. At this stage, she was 4 years old when all of this started. And this was all within about 3 minutes. All of this happened. So it was very fast paced. And by this stage, we didn't notice anything about her eyes or her face, because I was trying to wash her hair because it was like everywhere. It was everywhere. And we noticed something was off, and so my husband started calling for an ambulance. They got to us within about 15 minutes, so we were quite lucky. But by that time, we got her quickly out of the shower, wrapped her in a towel. She was not wearing anything at this point, so we got her in a towel. Israel was sitting with her on his knee in the hallway, trying to get any reaction out of her, because by this point we noticed her eyes were just stained to the right completely. Her head was to the right, and her face was kind of facing me when she was on his knee, and I noticed that from her right eyebrow it started to twitch, and it was going down her right face, and then her arm started like going like that. The ambulance officers got to us, and she progressively started to twitch more until 35-40 minutes into her just not being there at all. She went into a convulsing seizure, and that lasted for I think about 10 minutes. So all up, her seizure, from which we didn't know was a seizure at the time, start to end was about 45 minutes. So went to the hospital. We'd didn't have any meds by this point. So we went to the hospital. We got an EEG done, we got an MRI done, and all of them were normal. There was nothing, it showed nothing abnormal, which the doctors were kind of confused at. But we got sent home, but they gave us they explained that what she had was a seizure. It was just an absent seizure type of situation, but they didn't really want to, they called it a focal seizure. They didn't want to name it at that point because it could have just been a one-off. I kept getting asked questions. Did she bang her head earlier that day? Did she have a fever? All of these questions. Did she take something type of, did she inhale, or did she take something that she shouldn't have that could have resulted in a seizure? No, she didn't take anything. She didn't have a fever. She didn't bang her head at all that day. It just kind of was a bizarre situation for us that I was worried that I was losing my daughter. Israel didn't think she was gonna die from it, but he did think that we might not ever get her back. So we were happy to see that the next day in the morning she was tired and sore, but she was awake and alert, and she thought she was in the hospital because she had thrown up. She didn't didn't remember anything else. And I think that might have been June last year. From there she had a seizure nearly every month, sometimes more than once a month. The second seizure, we had been given this what kind of called rescue meds, which is called midazolam. And midazolam, it is a sedative, but it stops the seizure. It stops the seizure from happening. So it stops it from happening because of the sedativeness of it. The issue we had is that we gave it to her, and luckily we were at the hospital when it was ministered to her, but the dosage they told us to give for her body weight was too high, and she stopped breathing. She stopped, all of her stats dropped, and then she stopped breathing. So her temperature, her heart rate, her pulse, everything completely stopped. Her breathing stopped her, and it was very, very scary. And the resus team was really, they were a little shocked at the reaction. And it turned out they had given us, the doctor, when we first went in, had given us too high of a dose to give to her. So they took it down from 3 to 2. And so in August, she had her third seizure. And we gave her the 2 mils. We called an ambulance. And all of her stats were dropping again when we got to the resus room. So every time they'd take the breathing mask off of her, all of her stats would drop completely. So they'd put the mask back on her. So we're in the resus room for a few hours. And then that's when they put the midazolam down a bit more. Until it was at 1.5, which seemed to, it still dropped her stats a bit, but it seemed to do what it was meant to do. And she had a seizure, and she continued to have seizures until December last year, 2020. And this was one of the worst months for her and her seizures, because she had one major seizure. She didn't have any seizures less than 20 minutes, and that's only if we gave her the midazolam. If we didn't give her midazolam, they went for way longer than 30 minutes. They could last up to about an hour. If we give her the midazolam, she has about 15-20 minute seizures, nothing less than 5 minutes. So she had a seizure in December. 2020, and then a week later she had another major one, so we went to hospital for that, like that one, the first one, and then a week later she had another major one, so we took her to the hospital. We called an ambulance, took her to the hospital. All of the same kind of symptoms, like all of her seizures were similar. Her eyes would turn, her face would turn, she would slowly start to twitch. But if you weren't paying attention, you might not notice straight away that she was having a seizure, because it got to a point where she could talk to you for at least 5 to 10 minutes leading up to the eye turning. So anyway, so she had her second seizure of December. In December, her second seizure of the month. And then we got up to the resus room. She had already been given, we'd already administered the midazolam, so she was kind of like out. She was sedated. And about an hour after the meds, she started to open her eyes, and the doctor in the resus room was like, "Oh, she's waking up." So I moved close because I was confused. She never wakes up an hour after the meds. It always takes at least 3 hours, if that. This was early in the morning, like 5 or 6 in the morning, when she had had the first seizure of the day. She'd never ever had 2 seizures in one day before, let alone 2 seizures in a month. And I noticed something was strange about her, and the doctor kind of walked off after she'd said, "Oh, she's waking up." And I was like, she's not awake. The doctor was a little confused. I said, "Look, her eyes were going shaking side to side, which had never happened before. Her hair was doing it like a gulping thing, and when I held her hand, it was like shaking." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure she's having a seizure." I remember saying to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "What?" Came over, checked, and she was like, "Oh." Turns out the doctor had never seen, this doctor in resus had never seen a seizure like Valen's before, so she didn't notice any of the signs because she had never seen it before. So she waited 5 minutes and administered some more midazolam, and the seizure stopped after about 5-10 minutes. And as horrible as it was seeing the second seizure, I'm glad it happened, because the doctor in resus saw for the first time a seizure she never had, and it made me hope that she would be a lot more onto it when you're in resus, because she didn't really check Valen properly when she thought Valen was waking up. And that's when, the next month, when we saw her specialist at the hospital, we decided to put her on, Israel and the specialist decided to put her on daily meds, because the seizures seemed to be getting worse, and not only that, but her behaviour was changing. Now, if you know Valen, you know that she loves singing randomly. She's a very happy child normally, and a lot of other things that she just wasn't anymore, and that was because of the seizures were kind of altering her personality, and that's what the doctors didn't want to happen. They were hoping that with the Panayiotopoulos syndrome, you're meant to have about 4 seizures over the course of your childhood, and then you would grow out of them. At least that's what the stats said. Valen at this point was coming up to 12 seizures within 6 months. And the doctors weren't happy with that, let alone the fact that she's supposedly fitted in the bubble of Panayiotopoulos syndrome, but the more seizures she had, the more outside of that little bubble there were things popping up in her seizures that didn't fit into that anymore. But she's still classified as having Panayiotopoulos syndrome, as an epilepsy. So she went on medication, and it did stop her seizures, but I noticed she started to get these weird spots on her leg, and we were told that if she has any type of reaction to the meds, to take her into the hospital straight away because it could be dangerous. And I took her in, and at this point, the day before, 3 days prior, 3 days in a row, she had been thrown up just that night. And the doctor in the ER, from the same, someone from the same so we're what is it called? Team. A person from the same team as her specialist had come down, because her specialist wasn't on at that point because it was at night. He was more interested in the fact that she'd thrown up just that night for the last 3 days. He wasn't worried about the spots, but and so we got sent home because they were like, there's nothing to worry about. They did think that her throwing up 3 days in a row just that night was related to her seizures, but because she didn't have a seizure, hadn't had a seizure then, they weren't worried. Though she did have one breakthrough seizure on the meds in January just after she'd started, but we think that because the meds actually dulled the seizure, so they were actually starting to do its job by that point. And then a month after that, her rash had gotten worse, and I sent pictures, it was getting really bad, and Alan was complaining it was sore, and I knew it was because of the medication, but no one believed me until I sent pictures to the doctor, her specialist at the hospital, and said it's just getting worse. He called me the next day saying he'd done more research, and it turns out, I put a photo of the rash. I'll try and put a photo. I don't know if I have that editing capability yet. He called me saying that we need to stop the midazolam because the rash was connected to it, and it turns out he had never seen a rash like that before, because it's a very rare reaction to the meds that she was on, and he wanted her to put her on a nude meds and slowly stop the other one, because stopping it completely is a little harsh for a child her age. So we had to slowly put the doses down, and while we were putting the doses down, we had started on this new medication. We agreed, after getting information and talking to her GP, to try this, to change medications, because the meds were stopping her seizures, and she'd been on the new meds for about 3 months, I think. 3 months before we decided to change meds. And through the 2 months of her going off of the other meds and starting the new meds, her mood, her emotions were pretty horrible, because any of the meds make any of the children on them, especially Alan, really emotional, and mood switches really fast, and it's not really normal for her to switch from being happy 1 minute to bawling her eyes the next. So she's on this new med, and it's called the name I remember for it is Keppra, but all of the medications have 2 different names. Anyway, she's been on this for quite a few months now, and it has stopped her seizures, but one of the side effects is rage, and I'd never seen her shake with rage before this medication, and it wasn't nice. she did have a seizure a few months, 5 months ago, after she had been on this medication for a few months, for about 2 months. She had a seizure, but it was a different seizure. She was like rocking backwards and forwards, and it was way different to her other seizures. And we're up to 5.5 months seizure free at the moment, which is amazing, considering she was having more than one pretty much every month last year. What else is there? Oh, so because of the rage, she was put on, I call it B6, but the prescription in New Zealand is called something else. It starts with a P. Anyway, I can get the proper names for everything if you guys want, but they don't really matter for your information. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, she's on another med which is called B6, and we give that to her daily, and it has stopped her rage. She still sometimes shakes with rage, but it stopped the major rage that she was having, and her personality was coming back with the new meds and with the B6. It was, she started to sing again. She started to just be her happy self. She's a 5-year-old, so she still has, you know, every child has moments where they're like crying or upset or something, but she's herself. I just want to come on and say, this next clip is going to be a short video of her seizures, of one of her seizures back from last year, and it's the beginning of it where she can still communicate, so you can just kind of see kind of a little bit of what happens. And I know it sounds weird that we videoed her, but the doctors at the hospital requested videos of her seizures, so they could, if it was possible anyway, so they could kind of grasp a little bit about more of her seizures while it was happening. So this is just a warning if you don't want to see it in the video here.
Mm-hmm. You have to sit up. Let's move your arm a little bit, because it looks like the oxygen's getting not into it. It's going a little bit blue. You're feeling tired? You can close your eyes if you want to.
Yeah, so that was her seizure. Sorry if it was kind of scary for people, but kind of, it was just the beginning of it. You can see in the video her eyes kind of deviating if you were paying attention to it. Thank you for watching. The next video that I'll be uploading will just be some questions that we've been asked over the course of her epilepsy, about her epilepsy and stuff about her. If you have any more questions you want to, just let me know and I can answer any questions you have. Thanks. Bye.